Waarom...
More and more. It allows for the possibility of the view of the artist's oeuvre at an ambitious scale, and it allows for that practice to expand and negotiate our museum on its own terms. And so it's with great pleasure that we began to work with Hito almost 2 years ago on the development of this exhibition. There can be no doubt about the relevance and importance of this filmmaker, writer and thinker over certainly the last decade and even more. Her ability to deftly and skillfully engage with the incredible complexity and speed of developments in our changing relationship to digital and the internet allows for not only insight, and as Charles said, maybe a thought towards a possible future, but it's also an intelligent, robust, critical, and often hilarious insight into our own contemporaneity. In her filmic works and elaborate installations, Steyerl implements the methods and means of the digital world to her will, deftly employing montage, adapting and riffing off a plethora of digital images, suggesting new ways in which to intervene and engage. As a filmmaker, she's also very much aware of the increasingly difficult status of the documentary image as a genre and practice in the digital age, not quite fitting between cinema and the black box and television on one side, and the art space, museum or gallery on the other. And so that was what was so exciting about trying to bring these things together in our museum in the last year in thinking through these ideas, just simply this intelligence and awareness and willingness to kind of test these boundaries together. Designed in collaboration with architects Marcus Studio Meeson, the exhibition reflects on images and the condition of their visibility and circulation. One could say one starting point is the smashing of the TV LCD matrix, making this structure visible at a precise moment of its destruction. In a similar vein, many works reflect on the material, political, and technological conditions of visibility and invisibility. The focus on the infrastructures of images reveals cycles of raw materials and geopolitical frameworks underlying the circulation of data. This exhibition follows the transformations of data, morphing into matter and back again, changing established protocols of producing documents and writing history. Other works in the exhibition touch on the infrastructure of the museum itself and the involvement of the art world with geopolitics, national security, surveillance, and militarization, as well as the impact of the financial crisis on image production. Also, a wonderful strand for us here, and one of the fantastic reasons to have her, and we're so proud of having this major show here in the Vanabbe, is her attention to the specific artistic practices of the Russian avant-garde and how they relate to notions in the past of political urgency. And this rereading has perhaps for us at the Vanabbe been an even deeper and more fulfilling reason to invite Hito to be here. What has also been great about working with her, and beyond our appreciation of a fine mind and great works, is how each element of the project, the publication, the digital campaign, and the exhibition design, have all developed at their own space and at their own time and with a different set of partners. In intense dialogue with Studio Miesen, Hito has developed a complete exhibition, which on a really ambitious scale has generated a variety of physical encounters as one walks through the classic space of the old building. The limits of the art space and the nature of the black box are all firmly tested and morphed into a very singular exhibition experience. Further, she's worked with my dear colleague Nick Akins and designer Ardi Haliti in a beautifully designed book called Too Much World, which allows for not only a close reading of all of the films in a series of wonderful texts, both old and new, and also a different platform through which to reread the images themselves. We're really grateful to all of them for their hard work on this wonderful book. With this project, finally, we've had the opportunity also to let other elements of what goes into producing a moment like this have their own energy and dynamic. And so it was a great pleasure to work with Studio Moniker on what I think has been an amazing digital campaign. Hito, we all value your generosity in enabling and stimulating such productive collaborations. Thank you very much. So what I would like to do now is remind you of the fact that there will be another talk on the 24th of May on the topic of circulationism with a series of wonderful speakers, including Hito herself, David Riff, Josephine Bosma, and Meta Hammond. So it would be wonderful to see some of you back if any of these ideas and thoughts have provoked a further conversation that we'd love to have with you. What we're going to do now is take a small break for 5 minutes, as I would love to introduce the performance, the ongoing developing performance by Hito, which will happen here in approximately 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. So if anybody wants to leave or to see the show, feel free. But if you want to witness this performance, please stay put. Okay, and the performance will be called 35 Ways to Break Through a Wall. Thank you very much.
Ja.
Ik wil hem uitgebreid kopje.
Ja.
Op.
was uitgevallen. Internet kwam eruit. Alles kwam
Oh ja. Nee.
Afternoon, and thanks especially to Annie for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. 35 ways to break through the wall. 1989 to 2014. In 1989, people thought that the Apple logo memorializes Alan Turing, a famous mathematician and scientist who laid the foundations for computer science, especially with his pioneering research into artificial intelligence and code breaking. Turing committed suicide in 1954 by biting into an apple laced with cyanide, and many people interpreted this as a reaction to being massively persecuted by the British state in Gay. In 2014, people thought Turing's suicide was a reenactment of Disney's animation movie Snow White. A while ago, I saw a remarkable barricade, and this happened in Turkey. The barricade as such was not that remarkable. It was made of dug-up cobblestones and urban furniture just thrown onto a pile. People have been doing this for a very long time, but the remarkable thing was the movement and flow of people around that structure. Because first of all, the people who built it defended it against the police who were attacking it using rubber bullets and tear gas, and they ended up conquering the barricade, and they were defending it against other people, and then it was evacuated, the people reoccupied it, but then started defending it into yet another direction. So it looked as if this barricade had at least 5 different fronts facing in all possible directions, and those fronts were all fully mobile and could be flipped around at will. And that reminded me of that artwork by Yoko Ono, which, as you can see, shows a set of chess with 2 full sets of only white figures. Brian recently mentioned that in the text. And in this game, the opponent is unknown and is completely unclear who he or she is, and most probably, most likely, it is even yourself. And this is a far cry from the situation in 1989, when there were clear spatial antagonisms, there were clear fronts, there were physical walls separating east from west, from black and white, and online from offline. But maybe the barricade looked a bit different, actually, and this is a screenshot from the first presentation of a Macintosh personal computer ever, which Steve Jobs did in 1984. And in this presentation, suddenly you have a chess game popping up on the screen, and it only shows a set of white figures. In 1989, the most powerful order in Europe was the wall. In 2014, the most powerful order in Europe is water. The flow of water is not restricted to any specific location, it is instead channeled through any building's walls, through anyone's bloodstreams and bodies, eventually surging to drown people and to flood coastlines, to gush from your eyes because of heartbreak or heartbeat or tear gas. Also, the water might freeze over, and then you can build the wall in exactly the same place it used to be in. Look at this. This is President Obama's most recent speech at the Vancouver Gate in Berlin, and this is exactly where the Berlin Wall used to be standing, and he's talking about breaking the walls in our hearts, and while standing, a transparent barricade made of bulletproof ice. And when the water melts again and it starts flooding the walls, and all walls get kind of soaked, with all this liquid, and they are all boarded up, so to speak. They get soggy and they start sagging, and this is what they look like. In this situation, a chess game can no longer be imagined to be a 2D horizontal affair. No, it has to extend to the vertical axis as well. In 1924, Marcel Duchamp and Man Ray started developing vertical chess. Here they are seeing that on a rooftop. This is from a film in Leclerc called Entracte in 1924. And they are starting to get the feel of verticality, right? And then it took them quite a while to come up with the final. In 1989, people started walking through walls, but where were they headed anyways? People assumed they were walking towards freedom, but this was not entirely correct. In fact, they were all walking towards the internet. This is an advertisement for Microsoft Windows. You see the tagline is "Life without breaking down the rules in the consumer's life." The idea was that consumers would receive a concrete envelope with a hammer, and then they had to smash it, and inside there was a ticket to win a trip to the remnants of the Berlin Wall. Something similar. But, even though people were headed towards the internet, it didn't mean that they all got there, or that even those who got there were able to stay there. To be more precise, people started walking or even running towards a condition where borders were defined by a very simple rule. The inside would be defined by the location of online stores and tumblers, which had by then replaced 3D institutions like hospitals or postal offices or bookstores or libraries. And the outside was a mix of surgical strikes and external camps and call centers. And then you have the borders between inside and outside growing longer and longer, and they start folding into one another, folding into the internet basically, frustrating its ideology of free access and circulation and consumerism, networking. The situation becomes more like a sponge, in which a multiplicity of folded-in borders are enclosing and also undermining pockets of internet liquidity which promise oceanic feelings and never-ending loops. In 1989, one used to show the world as a map, 2D, horizontal plane. In 2013, the world is shown as a CGI. This is a 3D animation for a gated shopping mall in South Asia. There is a security perimeter ready to be defended by armed guards, and inside there are transparent render ghosts, fake fountains, and ripped grand shops. The whole thing is made of inflated polygons and tortured plastic, entirely rendered and surveilled and maintained via offshore call centers. And every single one of these grand shops is personally run by Joseph Stalin. And previously, Stalin's grand shops were all pop-up galleries, featuring the exact same potted plant installation. every external perimeter fence borders a new mall, and some malls start folding into other ones, so that NATO barbed wire is popping up in between the galleries. The map of the world might also look like this. This is a hand-drawn map of the Westgate shopping mall during its siege. In 1989, the term fourth generation warfare, 4GW, is coined by a number of US analysts who try to characterize conflicts which are defined by a blurring of traditional distinctions between civilian and soldier, between war and politics, but also between offline and online reality. And 4GW is defined by insurgencies, by guerrilla warfare. They call it open source guerrilla, that operate with flat hierarchies. In 2014, guerrilla is the name of a trading algorithm developed by Credit Suisse. It uses a variety of trading techniques to cover its tail in response to liquidity opportunities. And the section that came up with the guerrilla algorithm is the Advanced Execution Services Unit. And you really don't want to really know what these guys are doing, because most probably they are responding to liquidation opportunities. The first trading algorithm was actually developed in 1989 by a person called Steve Swanson, and he named it Borg to refer to the evil alien race in Star Trek. And in 2013, high-frequency trading has become so popular and also dominant that new underwater cables are being laid out under the Atlantic to link financial centers like London and New York to gain some essential, nanoseconds which would accelerate trades even more. And there seems to be only one serious obstacle to that. And when I first heard the story, I couldn't really believe it, but you will see the obstacle now for yourself, swimming into the frame from the left, and you will see what it's doing. The sharks have very curious with sharks, because sharks don't like copper cables, right? They only go for fiber optic cables. Marine biologists have been dispatched, to catch sharks, and they caught some sharks, huge sharks, and they force-fed them with cables, and they would only go for fiber optic cables. So at the moment, in 2014, sharks are the only serious obstacle to the acceleration of high frequency. In 1989, he invents the World Wide Web. This is a diagram from his proposal, and his boss writes on the cover, vague but exciting. The World Wide Web was ahead anyway, and 2 years later, it's in 2011, Ayastan Shakarian single-handedly cuts off web access to the whole of Georgia and Armenia. This lady was dubbed the spade hacker by local media. She was digging for copper not far from Tbilisi to sell Azerbaijan. Just went online for half a day. Digging for copper is quite a common thing to do in some countries of the former Soviet Union as a means of providing subsistence. When asked for a comment, Ayastan Shakarian added, "I have no idea what the internet is." In 2014, many people find themselves at the other end already of the internet condition. They are being ejected from it either by violence or by mistake, or also by choice, or simply by the fact that suddenly a pop-up law suddenly appears right inside your living room, and your living room is of course a studio slash a sweatshop slash an outsourced render farm for a private military contracting. People find themselves stranded in local situations, increasingly defined by massive social inequality, a literal hunger, but also subsistence struggle around land and resources. So instead of trying to break out of something, for many it's about figuring out how to break back in. But into what, and how? In 1989, people broke through the Berlin Wall. In 2013, an internet user has admitted hacking a service provider's computers, but also at the same time threatened to burn down the offices and went to, to threaten the poor guy himself with an axe. And this person knows that in order to break back into the internet, you have to go about it both offline and online, because this is where the internet lives nowadays. One has to physically not only hack into the servers, but even into the door of the provider itself. But many people also have started treating the web as a zone of major contamination. They wear protective gear and all sorts of anonymizing devices, keeping just a facade, a very thin veneer of small talk and loves for the corporate web. And instead, they evacuate into strategic withdrawal, into camouflage and subterfuge, and more aligned with practices of people who were never able to reach this territory in the first place, going off the grid to abandoned countrysides to fight mining companies and white power militias. In 1989, people trashed Secret Service headquarters and their archives. This is a picture of Stasi headquarters at the Mannstraße after it was being ransacked in November 1989. In 2014, people did not notice. September 5th, 2013, news. The Turkish hacker group Red Hat announced today via Twitter that it had hacked the website of the Turkish police, leading to a temporary halt at all entrances and exits through the country's borders. The international entrances and exits were effectively halted for almost 5 hours. The group declared that they had hacked the website in protest against police brutality during the Gezi protests. In 1990, it turned out that the number of the people who stormed the Stasi archive were actually Stasi agents who managed to trash a number of files potentially containing evidence against them. There was one picture which was not destroyed, and it shows a Stasi member kneeling down to receive an unknown award. It seems to have something to do with telecommunications. In 1989, this guy was 35 years old. In 2014, this guy is 27. And he says, "Oh mom, why don't you just shut up? I finally found a gallery to show my post-internet style for sculptures." In 1989, people start crossing the border from Turkey to Greece, obviously for economic reasons. In 2014, people start crossing the border from Greece to Turkey, obviously because of economic reasons. But in 2014, people start tunneling out again of Turkish data space using virtual private networks, changing their DNS settings to escape an internet controlled by the government, by the AKP that had taken down Twitter and I think it still has taken down YouTube. But the people who have escaped the AKP-controlled internet, of course, wash up in the NSA-controlled internet that does not take down Twitter and YouTube, but controls Twitter and YouTube by, for example, using this devised this technology called Squeaky Dolphin. It's a NSA slide, and Squeaky Dolphin monitors social media behavior in real times by computing likes and shares and follows and notes and that kind of thing to predict human behavior. This is the map of Turkish data space in 2014. Even Duchamp and Manuel don't really understand it. But perhaps this space is much less complicated. In 1984, the first Macintosh computer was presented by Steve Jobs. And this was, in fact, not a chess game at all. It was a video game that dealt with the figure of Alice in Wonderland, and she's, basically battling all these white chess figures. But in 2014, a new country is founded online, a new nation, and it is not the Turkish nation, but the Turkish nation. What is the Turkish nation? Turkers are workers for Amazon's Mechanical Turk platform, and this is a cloud working platform which starts from the assumption that there are some tasks, a few ones, which humans are able to perform more efficiently than computers. So, for example, recognizing photographs and tagging them. So these micro activities are being outsourced to humans at the cost of sometimes less than 1 cent. And if people go about it very quickly, they manage to earn an average wage of $1 per hour. And there are 500,000 Turkers by now in 119 countries. And they founded Turkish Nation as a sort of support platform for exchanging their experiences and so on. And of course, Amazon's Mechanical Turk platform is called after the famous chess automaton, which was called the Chess Turk, made by the Roman Emperor in the 18th century, rendered immortal by Benjamin, who mentioned him in the first chapter of his notes on history. But today, a Turker is not a mechanical Turk, but an under minimum wage screen worker. And in fact, I think this was the real innovation that Apple made in 1984. It was not the presentation of the world's first personal computer, but the that in order to be free, you didn't have to break through a wall, but you had to break through a screen. And this is, in fact, the content of the TV ad, very famous TV ad. Most of you will know it already, with this product.
We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our hands shall talk themselves to death, and we will ride them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh, and you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
US, where companies will be awarded, the capability to control web content, but also speed, connection speed, and access to certain parts of the web in a quite similar way. Apple's 1984 TV clip is based on this print campaign, which they didn't realize, which states there are monster computers working in big business and big government that know everything from what they pass to state. to how much money you have in the bank. In 1984, Apple explained why 1984 won't be like 1984. In 2014, Apple has not yet explained why 2014 won't be like 1984. But the NSA did explain it, in fact. And again, I'm going to show you slides, leaked slides, which are original NSA slides from a presentation called Does Your Target Have a Smartphone? And this presentation explains how the NSA was able to access all data on your iPhone by basically mining sync files that are connected when you sync up to iTunes. Look at these files they did in their own presentation. They are referring to the original 1984 clip by Apple asking who knew in 1984 that actually Big Brother would turn out to be Steve Jobs and the zombies would be paying customers. In 2014, Apple has re-released its Alice in Wonderland white chess game for the iPhone. And they made one change, that is that the figure of Alice can be exchanged by Barack Obama, who is seen hopping over the chess game, yelling, yes we can. And if you want to know what he's doing here, he's breaking the walls in our hearts and minds. In 1989, the former wall was turned into a screen. But in 2014, the screen is no longer in 2D, but in 3D. It has become vertical and horizontal and extends, in all dimensions, and even Duchamp and Man Ray are getting totally confused over this and have now been conjuring a release of vertical chess for the iPhone. In 1989, people thought that the Apple logo memorializes Alan Turing. Alan Turing committed suicide in 1954 by biting an apple laced with cyanide. In 2014, people remember that if sharks can take out cables by biting them, one could also just keep going biting into that apple until it's gone. Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you so much for your extraordinary performance. We shall open the doors, I think, and celebrate together.
Wat de rest heeft.